To invite you to just relax, close your eyes, rest in the presence, and hold space.
Namo Namaha Ganapataye Namo Namaha. Gam Ganapataye Namo Namaha. Gam Ganapataye Namo Namaha. Jai Ganesha Gananata Dayaniti Sakala Jai Ganesha Gananata Dayaniti Sakala Vignakara Dura Hamari. Jai Ganesha Gananata Dayaniti Sakala Vignakara Dura Hamari. Namo Namaha.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Welcome to our weekly online satsang. Satsang being a Sanskrit word that means literally community of truth, which sounds pretty lofty. A satsang is happening anytime two or more people come together who are on the path of awakening to share their spirits, to share their presence, to share their energy, to support one another. Spiritual community would be a simpler way to put satsang probably, but satsang sounds cool. But it's really important that everyone find at some point a spiritual community that you relate to. It certainly is. We all have different journeys, even though they're parallel in many ways. And we may go through a time where we really find ourselves isolated. It's just us and the divine presence.
Just.
Exactly. But certainly in the bigger picture of the journey, it's essential that we share our awakening and our challenges with others and strengthen one another and enrich one another. So find a meditation group or a blessing circle or a prayer group that you really resonate with, other people that are experiencing the same awakening journey that you are. Oftentimes that leads us out of our comfort zone. Maybe we've belonged to a temple or a church or a synagogue or a community, a spiritual community of some type for many, many years, maybe our whole life. But as we begin to really awaken and transform, we discover we have more in common with someone from another tradition who's also awakening than the people we've been hanging out with, sharing the same belief systems and rituals and practices. So I always throw that out there because we're doing this virtually online, and I think this is really important and a wonderful use of modern technology and the internet. We have people join us in these satsangs from the other side of the planet, from other continents and countries, and this seems to cross all boundaries. We appreciate that, but do try to find a group locally, and if there isn't one, go to our website, pull up the 36-minute Flowering Heart initiation video, and find at least one other person and just hit play on your computer. And you're welcome to do that, to download our video and use it. And 36 minutes later, whoever has watched it with you, you're all ready to give each other blessings and be in the presence and hold space together. And it's easy. Do it. So during these satsangs, we open it to questions about the spiritual journey, about your spiritual practices, about breakthroughs you might be having, about challenges, obstacles you may be facing, things in your own life related to the spiritual journey. And when you share it, it helps the entire group that gathers. And the group that gathers is a lot more people between now and next Monday than even who will be with us here tonight. Because people tune in from different time zones and places all week long. So that's your job. Other than to just be here and soak it up and be refreshed and be strengthened, is to ask in your heart, is there a question, is there something, an area where you might be seeking more clarity, more insight, and to share that. And that always seems to move the divine presence itself to pour out inspiration and light to all of us. So, before I forget, please, if you're on Facebook Live, give us a like or a love, a heart or a thumbs up, or one of the other emojis is fine. But that tells us that you were here, and we can see the names of those who give us a like or a love or some emoji at the end. If you're on Vimeo or one of the other platforms, you'd have to enter something in the chat. And that would be great, because we'd like to know you were there too, if that's where you went. Then, after some time for questions and answers and sharing, we'll be doing some very specific intent blessings for the issues, the needs, that you've brought with you tonight, the people that you're carrying in your heart, the situations you're facing in your life. But know that the Flowering Heart blessing is flowing out to you right now. The Divine told us when we were given this blessing, it's very ancient, of course, but we were given it by the Divine a little over 7 years ago, after being involved in other forms of blessing and Diksha and Shaktipat and other things for many, many years. The Divine said, start giving this to people and tell them it doesn't belong to any particular tradition or teacher or master or avatar or hierarchy, or it comes directly from me, the Divine. And it's a free gift of grace, which means don't charge for it. Just give it to people. Give it away. And if they want to be initiated, to share this blessing, just tell them once you've received it and connected with it, you are initiated. Just invite the Divine to pour it through you and it will work. If you want to know more about that, you can go to floweringheart.org, O-R-G, and just watch that 36-minute video. There are hundreds of pages of other material that is supportive and integrative with the journey that we're talking about, awakening and the Flowering Heart blessing. But the Flowering Heart blessing is something that awakens your sense of connection with the inner Divine. Many beautiful forms of blessing that open the door to various states of consciousness, which can be experienced in the orbit of many great spiritual teachers alive on earth today that are sharing blessing. But this one is particular in that it opens the door to the indwelling Divine, which is your true sacred self. It is your true essence. You are one with the Divine already. And your true essence is already enlightened. So there's nothing out there. In fact, the out there is just a reflective mirror of the inner world. The outer world is a reflection of the inner world. The light in your guru's eyes and the presence you experience with the saint, all of that is a mirror reflecting to you the truth of who you really are. The Flowering Heart blessing takes you right there and begins to release that light that begins to radiate out through all the layers of our being, inside out, through the spiritual layers, the soulish layers, the charges and thoughts and feelings and programming, through the physical layer of our bodies, into our relationships and beyond, into our connections to the outer world, to infinity. So, just a little insight into that. So I guess we can jump right in. But before I dive, I see we already have some questions and comments. But I felt moved tonight. I've been sharing some quotes. And this one's been hanging with me since before Christmas, really, for several weeks now. And now's the time. And this is 20 quotes for caregivers. Caring for someone else is one of the most selfless acts any of us can make. Whether it be for a loved one, a friend, or even a stranger. From an extended hand to a kind smile, the smallest show of support can make an immeasurable difference to those who need it most. As caregivers, however, we also must look inward and be aware of our own needs. Self-sacrifice is what makes looking after others such an admirable task. But that doesn't mean anyone should put their own lives or well-being on hold in the process. The healthier and happier the caregiver, the more love, attention, and energy they have to give. For those who can afford to do so, stepping up to better the lives of others is a beautiful and rewarding act of kindness, as these quotes attest. So let me share some. Kindness can transform someone's dark moment with a blaze of light. You'll never know how much your caring matters. Amy Leigh McCree, author. try to be a rainbow in someone's cloud. Maya Angelou. Caregiving often calls us to lean into love we didn't know possible. Tia Walker, author. Too often we underestimate the power of a touch, a smile, a kind word, a listening ear, an honest compliment, or the smallest act of caring, all of which have the potential to turn a life around. Leo Buscaglia, author. No one is useless in the world who lightens the burdens of another. Charles Dickens. Caring for our seniors is perhaps the greatest responsibility we have. Those who walked before us have given so much and made possible the life we all enjoy. Joy Hoven, U.S. Senator. John Joe. I'm getting genders and names wrong. Please, don't be insulted if you're one of these authors. We rise by lifting others. Robert Ingersoll, lawyer. Doctors diagnose, nurses heal, and caregivers make sense of it all. Brett Lewis, author. Be helpful. When you see a person without a smile, give them yours. Zig Ziglar. The more alert and sensitive we are to our own needs, the more loving and generous we can be toward others. Ida Lashan, author. The happiest people are those who do the most for others. The most miserable are those who do the least. Booker T. Washington. If you're someone people count on, particularly in the difficult moments, that's the sign of a life lived honorably. Rachel Maddow. My caregiver mantra is to remember the only control you have is over the changes you choose to make. Nancy L. Chrisman, social worker. It's not how much we give, but how much love we put into giving. Mother Teresa. Self-care is not selfish. You cannot serve from an empty vessel. Eleanor Brown, author. Remember, if you ever need a helping hand, you'll find one at the end of your arm. As you grow older, you will discover that you have two hands, one for helping yourself, the other for helping others. Sam Levinson, humorist. We're all just walking each other home. Baba Ram Das, spiritual guru. Offering care means being a companion, not a superior. Judy Cornish, author. They may forget what you said, but they will never forget how you made them feel. Carl Buechner, religious leader. The best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. Mahatma Gandhi. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful quotes. This is from a website that I've been enjoying so much. I mean, I told you where the quotes came from, but the collection of quotes and that little spiel at the beginning about caregiving is on inspiringquotes.com. Lovely site. It's been nourishing me most days, a little bit. Yeah. Christ said, it's as you do to the least of these my brothers and sisters that you do it to me. And he's trying to explain to people, here's a group of people that thought they were like serving God all their lives. They gave abundantly at the temple. They did all the proper rituals at the right time and the prayers and all that. And he said, you never did anything for me. And they go, what do you mean? And he said, well, as you never came and visited me in prison. You never clothed me when I was naked. You never fed me when I was hungry. You never gave me a place to live when I was on the street. And as you did it not to the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you did it not to me. So it just popped the balloon of religiosity and pomposity with something very simple. And he says to this other group, you visited me in prison. You fed me when I was hungry. You clothed me when I was naked. You brought me home when I had nowhere to go. And he says, enter into the joy of your Lord. And they're astonished. They go, when did we ever do anything for you? So this is a group of people that weren't even aware that they were serving the divine at all. And he said, but as you did it to the least of these people, the marginalized, the oppressed, those who are judged and cast off, as you did it for them, you were doing it for me and you didn't even know it. So caregiving is, amen to Gandhi. The best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. I was a typical adolescent. I wasn't typical. Okay, granted, I was having lots of mystical experiences, but I went through the existential angst and all the life questions that adolescents go through. And some days I just felt miserable about myself when I went to the Taoist temple and stood before my master. And he'd take one look at me, and I was so transparent to him. He'd know he'd see right through me. And this one night I walked in, so full of myself and, concerned about everything I was feeling and going through. And he came over and he grabbed me and he turned me around and he pointed across the room in the temple where there was a person who was in pain, who was suffering more than me, who needed healing. And I'd been given the energetic gifts to be able to help them. And he said, you go help that person. And it's like, I was thinking, I can't help anybody. I can't help myself. I'm miserable. I didn't say that to him because I knew better. Whatever he said to do, you just did it. So I began to walk across the room in the temple. And when I got to that person and reached out to them and said, how can I help you? My suffering disappeared. And I was just consumed in this flow of, at that point it was the Tao, it was the universal intelligence and energy that was just spontaneously flowing, and I began to get the message. If you're really hurting, if you're struggling, just look around. There are other people out there that are going through far more than you or I might be going through. And the minute we draw forth from our hearts to share our love and our care with them, we're released from selfishness, self-centeredness, ego. We're released. And all our real suffering is self-centeredness. When we no longer have the false self at the center of our concern about ourselves, for ourselves, when we're released from that, which is what liberation really is, we're free. That doesn't mean things will just be happy and pleasant all the time. We go through what we go through. We're humans on earth. But we can be part of the solution, the light givers who are always experiencing that hope and that light and that peace and that joy flowing through us in the service of others. You want to add to that?
No, that's...
How about the thing you experienced?
Which one? Today? Or?
No, when you felt in your body a lump.
Oh, yeah.
It's a great story.
It is a great story. Yeah. I was the one comment I wanted to make on that is I know most of you that have watched this webcast, I mean, that's been my most profound spiritual growth in the last 4 years, was when I started to just really ask the divine presence every morning to make me be a blessing to as many people as I can, and to help in whatever way I can throughout the day, even if it's just a smile. So yeah, this is about 8 or 9 years ago. I started to get a lump in my left breast. It was about the size of a pea. And we were doing a lot of processes, like 50 people coming to processes twice a month. And I wanted everybody to have just a retreat weekend. So I was cooking lunch for 50 people twice a month. And people would say, can I help? And I'd say, no, I got it. Just enjoy your retreat. And I had plenty of offers. Everybody was ready to just jump in and help. And I was like, no, I got this. So after a few months, this lump started to grow to about the size of a golf ball. and I was like, okay.
That's not good.
Okay, body, we're going to have a talk here. So I held my breast and I said, okay, what are you trying to tell me? And I got the memo that, your left side is receiving and breasts are about nurturance. And that's where, milk comes from and how you nurture and grow babies and all of that. So I had a talk with my breast and I said, okay, well, I got it now. I am not receiving nurturance. It's not that it wasn't all around me. I wasn't receiving it. I'd say no.
But you were giving it constantly.
Yes, I was giving it, but I wasn't bringing it in. I liked a couple of those quotes that talked about that, to make sure that you're nurturing yourself so that you can help others. And so I said, okay, I'll make a deal with you. We're going to have this lump just go away, and I'm going to make a diligent effort to receive nurturance. So the next time we had a big process, we had everybody in the kitchen, and people were washing, and people were rinsing, and people were drying, and
let people have the blessing of helping.
Right. And some were, putting food in containers, and everybody just pitched right in, and there wasn't room for everybody in the process. But the whole message of it for me was that, we have help all around us. And that's also true about spirituality and the divine presence and miracles. It's like all of this stuff is available to us all the time. It's just we're our own biggest obstacle because we don't allow it or receive it or even see it, because it may come in a different form than we're expecting. So anyway, over the next couple of weeks after I started learning to allow nurturance in, it just disappeared and disappeared and disappeared and disappeared. And anytime I tell this story, the first thing people say is, oh, did you get it biopsied? And I said, no, I didn't slip into fear. I didn't get concerned about it. I knew that there was just some kind of an imbalance with me and how I was being in the world. And
we're not suggesting that you forego medical treatment.
Oh, no.
We knew what it was. And Suzanne found out how to get rid of it.
Mm-hmm. By being in agreement with what my body needed, what my soul needed, what my spirit.
For people that are going through cancer treatment, it's really important, in addition to whatever modalities they're using, whether they're holistic or mainstream, part of, and doctors generally agree, you have to deal with your emotional, spiritual being and find out what's going on that you came to this. Mm-hmm. And what would it mean for you to get past this? What are you looking for in life? Mm-hmm. And that's an important ingredient.
Right.
Sometimes, as in Suzanne's case, and of course, it wasn't, biopsied or diagnosed, but that's all that was required.
Mm-hmm. It was just looking.
Get back in harmony with the Tao, mm-hmm. and boom.
Right.
So we have some interesting questions.
Okay.
Excuse me. Tristan's been keeping us
on our toes.
Thank you,
toes. Tristan.
Interesting how substances keep coming up. 3 weeks ago it was marijuana and spirituality, and last week it was psychedelics and spirituality. You'll see exactly, if you're on Facebook, you can read right along. I have a friend who does not practice purifying his ego as I do. I chant my guru's mantra. Recently, he had a hardcore trigger and seemed possessed when he drank alcohol. What is this phenomenon with ego and dark character? I had to use the blue light to protect me in this not so good situation. I had to then cut him off for my safety. Is possession real for someone who has a PTSD personality disorder? Thanks. I mean, bravo for your spiritual practice and your relationship with your guru, and that you're working on dissolving your ego, which is something only the divine can do. I mean, the ego cannot dissolve itself. It's so interesting. And that's one of those, and you probably already know this, but one of the insights that we get best early on in the journey is that any effort that the separate self or the ego makes to liberate itself doesn't work. The ego cannot dissolve the ego. The mind cannot dissolve the mind. It requires something transcendent to that. And that's the ingredient in the tradition that you are clearly a part of, that the guru brings in. The guru is a channel of divine light and grace. And okay, moving along. So here's this friend who got triggered hardcore and seemed possessed when he drank alcohol. You know, I think that a lot of us have probably seen people just go dark and mean and abusive when they're drinking. I also have seen people that are not affected that way.
Or that go that way without drinking.
Or yeah, I was going exactly. Yeah. I mean, no names, but we know people that get. I mean, their pupils go dilated black, and they go into a rage and become violent, and don't drink anything, and don't smoke pot, and don't don't do any of that stuff. But do they have PTSD? Probably, if we look deeply into the lives of those people, we would discover that there is unhealed trauma. This kind of emerging rage and loss of control is often manifesting through a person who themselves has been traumatized or abused. And healing it can be a lifelong journey. And in those people, there may be a lot of repressed rage. I mean, anything you resist will persist, but most of us know enough that if there's rage, if there's anger, if there's something hurtful coming up, that's not good. And so in a generous soul, the first thing people will do is resist and repress acting out rage, acting out anger, acting out abusive activity. But anything you resist will persist, so what do you do with it? Well, ultimately, those folks need to be assisted by divine grace, or there are great spiritual groups and processes that use breath work to help emerge these suppressed feelings, which are often just filled with self-judgment and self-hatred. And it needs to be healed, and to be healed, the charge needs to be discharged, but not discharged by acting out rage or abuse or anger or anything like that, but discharged by the soul having the grace and the strength in that moment to completely experience it and let it go, instead of keep running from it and trying to repress it into the unconscious. So I'm sorry this happened with your friend.
Well, and also the liver is an organ that processes a lot of things, but on an energetic level, it processes anger. And alcohol gets filtered through the liver. So oftentimes people will act out their anger triggered by the alcohol, because they are a little more open and more emboldened and a little more sedated to be able to act these things out than they normally would be just bottling it all up inside.
Some people self-medicate anger with alcohol. Depression, in Taoist, in Oriental medicine, the liver is that organ that does process on the negative side anger, but also giving, love, and nurturance. The spleen on the receptive left side of the body receives nurturance, receives love, receives stimulation in healthy ways. But when it doesn't, some people will feel depressed, and then they'll medicate with stimulants. The milder would be things like caffeine. The more intense would be things like methamphetamine, very destructive. The lungs are organs associated with grief, but also joy. I mean, all these organs in Oriental, there's a positive emotion and there's the flip side. So for the lungs, it's joy, of course, but it's also grief. And people often will self-medicate with smoke, which tends to be destructive to the lungs, just like alcohol is destructive to the liver, and too much stimulants is destructive to the spleen. This is fascinating stuff when you get into the study of Oriental medicine and Taoist teaching about the connection between mind and body. It's fascinating stuff.
You said something interesting there, though, about working on purifying your ego. And the more that I've discovered, because my connection with the Divine Presence has gotten so much deeper and there's so much more faith and trust, the more that I realize, like Michael said, we can't really do much about the ego, but be aware of it. So,
that disarms it.
Yeah, that disarms it. So when I feel my ego coming up, or an ego reaction or a charge, I've gotten to a place now where I can get it pretty quickly. Not always, because there's always those triggers that really trigger. But I get to a place where now when it comes up, I can look at it and I go, it's almost funny when you start to see it. It's like, oh, there goes that ego again. And that's brought me to a more gentle way of dealing with all of these aspects of my personalities and my charges and my programs and my ego and all this stuff that has the illusion that they have any control over anything, or that I have any control over anything. But when I'm coming from that small voice in my heart, which is not getting so small anymore, then there's no need for protection. There's no need to do anything with my ego except for be aware that it's happening and that I'm having these thoughts, these feelings, these criticisms, these judgments, these resentments, whatever games, drama, trauma, whatever games the ego wants to play so that it still feels its grip of control. When we can get to a space where we can just love through it and just see it for what it is, because the ego and the mind tend to want us to think that that's all that there is. But we're a lot more than that. We are that spirit inside that is actually unconditional love.
Okay, we got more questions,
Okay.
and we're Tristan, question 2. Can a person have more than one guru swami and keep real to their first one? It all depends on who you ask. You're asking someone that's going to say much the same what John Lewis wrote, which I'll read in a few minutes. But look, most gurus will tell you you cannot become enlightened, liberated, attain mukti unless you have a guru. That's clearly not true. Because Buddha didn't have a guru. If he did, it didn't work. and Christ didn't have a guru. Of course, he was born liberated. Eckhart Tolle, enlightened, didn't have a guru. So, but this is part of the traditional teaching in India, in the Hindu Vedic tradition, that you need to have a guru. Okay, well, a lot of traditions would agree that you need to have a spiritual director, a guide, someone that has gone the journey. The problem is that there are a lot of people presenting themselves as gurus who are not themselves enlightened. that's a problem. but a lot of the traditions, even the Christian, would say that for the mystic, you need a spiritual director who is themselves awakened, who can give you guidance. Okay. Often, the spiritual teacher, if you're lucky enough to find one, will say you've got to just be faithful to me. You can't go to anyone else. Which, in the beginning, there's some wisdom in that, because a lot of us flit like butterflies here and there. A weekend with this spiritual teacher, a week with that one. We do this for a while, and we don't get the enlightenment we were hoping for, and so we just keep flitting from teaching to teaching and teacher to teacher. So, and this isn't new. So, for instance, in the Taoist tradition that I was brought up in, my teacher said, you need to just study with me. There were others beginning to teach different, there are hundreds of styles of Qigong and approaches to Taoist internal alchemy. He is an amazing teacher. He said, you need to just, stick with me. And he'd get ticked off if I go off for a weekend to spend a weekend with Baba Muktananda or with Kala Rinpoche, the great Tibetan master, which I would do because, well, who wouldn't? That's very cool. But it's, giving me these disapproving looks. Okay, our tradition, our Taoist tradition, the Taoist elixir style, Dao Dan Pai, Lu Dongbin, the immortal yogi founder of it, said in one of his writings, your teachers will all tell you, you need to just stick with me. There comes a point where you need to do what makes sense, which is go out and experience the teaching and the presence of every enlightened teacher you can find. And don't listen to that, you've got to just stay here. But that's at a certain point of maturity and development. Otherwise, it can be very confusing. To stick with one teaching, one practice, one teacher that's bearing fruit is very important in the beginning. And then there comes, and you don't want to insult your teacher who says, if you go to another Swami or another guru, you're offending me. That can create difficulties. I mean, I knew people that spent years with a particular unnamed guru in India, a true God-realized master, and then they felt to be part of this other movement that was reaching lots of people all over the world. And when this guy went from his teacher to this other movement, his teacher, I won't mention any names, is very well known, would have nothing more to do with him. So I've seen that happen. So you got to be careful about it. But John just puts it simple. The best guidance I've heard is to get opinions from various sources and then pray for the answer. Now, that works when you're at a certain level of insight. As I said, if too early on you just are just constantly, this is one of the criticisms of the New Age movement, is a lot of New Age seekers go from initiation to initiation, teacher to teacher. And I'll use Ram Dass because we brought him up earlier. Ram Dass was introduced to Swami Satchidananda at some point, who was a great Swami. And Ram Dass, by this point, is a well-known spiritual teacher. But Satchidananda criticizes him. He said, you are like a man who heard that he had a field with a treasure buried in it, which is very biblical, And you want to find the buried treasure of total God realization and enlightenment that's buried in your field. So you picked the best looking spot you could find, you dug down a foot, didn't find anything. You went, that must be the wrong spot. So you went to another spot and you dug down 2 feet, still didn't hit the geyser, the treasure, the mother lode. You went, wrong spot. Satchidananda said, now your field, look at your field. It's got holes all over it. There's not a spot you haven't dug up. And here's the irony of it. Satchidananda said, if you just stayed in one place, any of those places, and just kept digging down, 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 you would have hit the center by now, and all would have been revealed. So that's the thing about about listening to so many voices that can confuse you. I'm just saying. But, okay. Jennifer says, on a lighter note, of course, all these notes are light when they're seen through the eyes of light. Just saying. Okay. On a lighter note, the concept, and incidentally, back to the first question, just because someone is acting out rage from a place of trauma and deep brokenness and self-hatred does not mean they're demon-possessed.
Right.
They could be acting out some of the collective darkness, the part of the collective consciousness of humanity. We got plenty of stuff without the help of demons. Okay? There are such spiritual beings. But most often when someone acts out from that brokenness and rage and trauma, it's not. But people seeing it would swear that person's possessed. So I just want to say it's usually not that. Okay. So Jennifer says, on a lighter note, the concept of being a blessing was a common refrain in a ministry I and some now grown-up friends used to be under. And a common way of expressing it during people's testimonies were that something had blessed their socks off. For the rest of our lives, it will never not be funny for us to have as inside joke that we took this literally and we'll look after each other's socks when something good happens, like they just might fly right off. That's too funny. That's too funny. I have definitely spent quality time in churches that tell testimonies about things that have blessed them.
Yeah.
In fact, we'd have whole testimony services, and part of the teaching, which is really good actually, is that people are told in these, it's probably an evangelical Protestant Christian community, although it could be a fundamental Catholic community too, that it's important to see what God is doing in your life, and if you receive a miracle or some special touch of grace, you need to share it with the community. So we'd have these testimony services where people are testifying to what God did for them. When you do that, not only does it bless everyone and bring the anointing or the grace of that miracle you received, it opens the door for more miracles. When you see what the divine is doing and you express gratitude and you tell others about it, the divine says, I want to give that one more. When we just keep it to ourselves and hide away with it, the divine says, well, they're just keeping it all to themselves.
I just thought of something fun you could do is take one of your socks after you have a blessing that knocked your socks off and put it in an envelope or like some kind of a journal or something and mail it to one of your friends with a written description of what miracle blessed your socks off, and then like pass it on. Like, what was that movie or that book about the traveling pants or something where these girls were really a close-knit bunch, and there's this whole story about how these pants go from one girl to the next. I don't remember it very well.
I don't know that story.
But I think that would be really fun, because then the person that gets the socks next and then passes it on gets to read what that blessing would be like, what the blessing was, and might help them to frame something going on in their life that they didn't see as a blessing, and they would be able to see it as a blessing and then pass the sock on.
Jennifer says, that's awesome. What a great idea.
It'd be a fun way to enrich that in all of you.
Yekaterina says hello. Hi.
Hi.
Carolyn says, I like your balanced answers. A lot of people say our guru is the only one. Yeah, you know what? That's a big red flag. You're welcome to say, our guru is the only one for me. And that may be true. Some people say, such and such a guru or avatar in India is the only one that can save humanity. Which is not different than people saying that you need to have the relationship with Christ that I have, or you cannot be saved. But I hear some of the same things from followers of different gurus, that our teacher's actually the one that can save humanity. And we could cut through all of it if we go deep enough to the point that we realize the teacher is the teacher. There's just one. There is one light, one love, one consciousness, one being that is the source of the universe, and we're all expressions of that. So a true enlightened teacher is a conduit for that one being, that one light. But if they're really enlightened, they know they're not the only one. So
the other thing too, what helps me clarify things very, very quickly is when I hear things like that, or if I hear teachings from some gurus or spiritual teachers, and they say, you know, this is the only one that can save the world, I think, is that coming from love or is that coming from fear? It's a big distinction for me.
Well, it may be love, because I've known people where it's come from fear, but I know people who definitely are trying to help and believe that their particular guru or their particular, and especially Christians.
But why would they need to say that's the only one if it was really coming from love?
Because if you don't get it, you're not going to get liberated.
Which is fear.
Anyway, well,
which is, just goes back down to fear.
Okay, we can't take a lot more time, and there are a couple more things to say here. I think we've dealt with that. And then John, with his typical humor, throws in, Ram Dass also liked his LSD. Okay, yes he did, didn't he? Jennifer, we read that. Tristan says, one last thing, why do blessings get passed with patakas? People may not know what patakas are, and we don't have a set out here right now, but patakas are like sandals, symbolically usually, and they're usually either made of precious metal or wood. And they're representative of the sandals, the sandalwood sandals that gurus used to wear in India. But in a bigger way, the patakas represent the feet of the divine. So when people pray, worship, touch the patakas, they're symbolically bowing down and touching the feet of the divine. Now, some of them think it's just their guru's feet. But when we were spending a lot of time in India, we heard it's the feet of the One, the universal One. So it's a beautiful way to link symbolically. And a guru or a master can really empower those patakas. Blessings are not always given through patakas, but in India they're a really powerful form because they are a link to the feet. Well, what are the feet? I mean, the divine has feet. What are the feet? The feet are the part of us, we're spiritual beings, that touches the earth. So the patakas represent the part of the divine that touches the earth, that touches us here if we humble ourselves and open to receive. That's why patakas work. Okay, Andrea writes, Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, the movie.
It. Yeah.
I think that's what you're referring to, Suzanne.
Thank you.
Well, I guess I'll have to watch that, the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. Okay, and finally, John, and then we're going to have to jump right into the blessings. I have heard from 2 different gurus in India over the last 2 years that all religions will disappear soon. One meant all religions, but his particular one, for me, this is a huge red flag. Yeah, me too. You know, but what that one that we both know is saying is that people are, although he keeps changing what he's saying, but when he was talking about that, saying that people are going to become so awakened, they'll have this direct, very personal relationship of union with the divine source. There will be no need for religious belief systems and rituals and rules and regulation. Religion is usually the belief system, dogmas and rules and regulations and prescriptions for the right way to worship and pray. Why do you need that when you're one with the divine and you're in a living relationship with the living God? You know, so yes, we could hope that in a time ahead, formal religion will give way to everyone on earth walking and talking with their God. And I think that's a beautiful vision. But, you know, when people stand up and say, you know, everybody's wrong but me, that's a huge red flag.
Yeah.
And your belief system is wrong.
Mine's right.
Mine's right.
That's always ego.
Spiritual ego is the worst of all.
It is.
It's just the worst of all.
It's so sticky.
But we're going to move on now. So go ahead and close your eyes if they're still open. And just center in your heart of hearts. And there, invoke the divine. Connect with the divine presence that dwells within you. With whatever you've brought with you here tonight. It could be a personal longing for enlightenment, for awakening, or longing for divine union, for God realization. Or it could be just for an end to suffering, for the healing of trauma within your soul, or a relationship in your life, or a friend you've been carrying that's burdened you, like Tristan. It could be a need for healing in your body, or healing in your soul of trauma. The divine presence wants to set you free. And it is all-powerful, all-knowing, all-wise, and all love. Unconditional love, no judgment, nothing to fear. Nothing to beg for, nothing to struggle for. Just open your heart now and receive the blessing that's flooding from the divine source to you right now. Soak it up, drink it in, receive it. The divine knows before you even ask what it is you need, what it wants to give you. Just drink it in. whenever you're ready, just open your eyes and begin to make direct eye contact with Suzanne and or me. Just keep looking at least one of our eyes as we dive into the light meditation. During this meditation, our eyes remain open. Suzanne and I become flooded with oceans of divine grace and love and light, and it flows through every pore of our being to you, especially through our eyes, which mystics have called the doorways of the soul. The light streams out through our eyes, in through your eyes, into your spiritual heart of hearts, causing the flames of divine love and the light of awakening within you to blaze brighter and brighter. Just keep eyes now. Meditate with us for a few more moments as the grace we've received settles within us. Meditating as long as you want, or find a place close by to lie in Shavasana. That means to lie on your back with your eyes closed, your arms loosely at your sides with your palms open, turned upward, and just dissolve with gratitude in the presence. We love you very much.
Much love, light, and blessings.
Until next we meet, know that the divine within us beholds the divine in you, and we bow to